Hey. Oh, that's right. Sorry. Like that. Right. Um, Today I have another video for you. This is going to be me talking about all the shorthand that I sort of use on this channel. And it happened accidentally. I didn't mean to set out to like start using a whole lot of language that you guys don't understand. But it sort of happened, and a lot of it is just shorthand that sort of has cropped up over the years in the bold action community. So here we go. This is my BA-lingo, a dictionary of bold action slang. Ish. And I actually reached out to both the Snafu guys in the US and the Juggernauts in Britain for this. I guess there's more lingo like slang in other places. I suspect that the Spanish have quite a lot, but it's not something that I am familiar with as I don't really speak Spanish. So this is more or less the BA lingo that's in English, although some of it just yeah makes no sense. Right, there are a few real life people that I sort of refer to by shorthand quite often, the Juggers, which is the bold action, the Juggernaut Bold Action Podcasts. That is a group of guys in England who play bold action competitively, and they are called the Juggernaut Podcast, and they have their own podcasts. Link will be in the description. Some of them have been featured on my channel before, um, so you might know them by at least names and faces. Um, and the shorthand for them as a group, as a club, I would guess, would be Juggers. That's how they refer to themselves, and that's how I refer to them. There's also the BA Alliance, the Bolt Action Alliance guys, who put out a very nice pack. By the way, the Juggers do as well. Um, and in the Bolt Action Alliance pack, there are some really nice missions. Then there's the Snafu guys. Snafu is also a podcast in America. They also release content on bold action and hobby stuff as well, and they organize tournaments. So all of these are clubs around the world that I know of and I speak about it sometimes. There are others as well. The Bacon Burgers and the HMG podcast in Australia spring to mind, but I may not mention them as often. And then we have FLGS, your friendly local game store, which is shorthand for the clubs or the game stores that we all go and play our games in. Because most of us don't have a gaming room in our houses. We might be able to set one up like temporarily. I am really fortunate. I do have a dedicated room in my house. That's my game room, but most of us don't. So friendly local game shops is also a real place that I sometimes use the shorthand FLGS for. And then there's a load of words about tournaments because I mostly do tournament stuff on my channel, right? Competitive bold action. So there's a bunch of words that I use about tournaments. So the WTC, that is an abbreviation for the World Team Championships, which is an international tournament, a four-man tournament that's been running since 2018, I think the first time was before COVID anyway. Um, and it's one that I've attended all of them. It's a brilliant tournament. It's a brilliant format. Um, has had difficulties in some respects, but has also been a huge success. Um, and then there's sort of a copy, a slight or an improvement on that format, which is the World Open War. It's a international tournament that so far has taken place in Britain, in Southend, near London, and is a three-man international tournament again. So it's something that has these two tournaments have created national teams for quite a lot of countries and have sort of brought bold action to, for me, a higher level, a higher competitive level um, than what it was before, where it was just local tournaments and maybe there was a national tournament for some countries. But for me, these tournaments really have brought bold action up in line with other miniature games that have national tournaments and international tournaments as well, where you have world championships in different games, right? The nationals are the national tournaments for a certain country where they try to find the national champion. Um, for me, an aspect of that is to have the best player from that nation be crowned the national champion. So that might not actually be the winner. And I am going to champion this difference here, um, that there is a difference between what's an open tournament and what's a national tournament. Or if you combine them, then there's a difference in how you do that. An open one is for me somewhere where everyone can attend, even people from abroad. And if you have a nationals that is open, then it means that the people coming from abroad can attend, they can win, but they can't become the national champion because in a national tournament you're looking for the best placed player in that nation, right? So for me that's a difference, and I think that that's something that I will be going forward will be using in that respect, in that way to champion the use of that of those words like that. We also have the TO, something that's been shouted at me quite a lot recently since I've been TOing quite a lot of tournaments. The TO is the tournament organizer. It is also the judge or most typically the judge at an event, at a tournament. So it's the guy that you ask all the questions of. Sometimes there's a difference between judge, TO, and EO. EO for me is a level higher. It's an event organizer, um, and that is when you have events where the guy who's actually doing all the organizing may not be the actual judge of the event. Typically, those two will be the same person, but we might actually have three different like roles that can be filled out by different people. So there'll be a judge, there'll be a TO, there'll be an EO. You could also have what's called a list checker, which is someone who goes over the lists for the event, but may not actually be the TO or something like that. So there's quite a lot of different roles that are filled out by different people at events. Then we have something called ringer. And yes, I know that this originally didn't mean what I'm going to use it for, but um, as some people have pointed out to me, um, but this is how people have started using the word in a context of miniature wargaming. So it was originally something where a really good player would be disguising as someone who didn't really know the game. But in Games Workshop games, so Warhammer 40k, a ringer means someone who the TOEO can throw in case of odd numbers. Someone who's just there to play games to make sure that everyone has a game. And that is how I use the term. Then we have the wooden spoon. At a tournament, the wooden spoon is the guy who loses. The worst placed player will, at least in tournaments in Denmark, they will actually be given a wooden spoon as a part of their prize, and then typically they'll also get the first pick of the prize pool because they've had a rough weekend. So the wooden spoon is the loser of a tournament. You can also quite often hear people talk about a cap on a tournament. So there might be a cap on players, or there might be a cap on order dice, or a cap on certain units. A cap means that there is a limit to how much you can bring of something. Um, comp is the collective term for what will be in a pack. Oh, I should have written a pack. A pack is the is what the TO or EO sends out to you, which has all the information that you need about a tournament. In that, there's typically comp, which is the limits that they place on what you can and cannot bring in your army. Um, so it might be a maximum of one flamethrower, a maximum of two Gurkhas, or whatever. That is comp, right? That is where the TOEO goes in and limits something or changes up the rules in a little bit so that the event runs the way that they want it to run. There are also two words that are not mutually exclusive, but are different: thematic and competitive. For thematic bold action, because bold action is inspired by real events, it's inspired by World War II. Theme and thematic events is a thing that happens where people try and recreate World War II or try to make it feel as much as a replaying of certain fights during World War II, right? Competitive is the opposite. That's where we treat it as a game, where we try to focus on the competition aspect, on winning the game instead of recreating the battles, right? So that's two different ways to play the game, and two different reasons to play the game, I guess, as well. Player ranking and list ranking, that is something that cropped up during the years of playing in WTC and World Open War. And it was started by Russell Wright, for me at least. That was the guy who started it for me. When after one WTC, he sort of sent out to all the captains, could you like rank the players that you faced 1 to 5, where 5 being the best player you ever played and a 1 being a bad player. And everyone got back to him, and I was like, this is a little like golf, isn't it? And I know that like in chess and other competitive games, you have like huge international and national rankings, so you can have the ELO system and whatnot. And I know that there are some people who've tried to make this work. I even was helping to try and make that work. It didn't really work out, but um, so for me, that system of being able to talk about how good is a player, how good is a list, that really helped. To give me a language for this channel. And I know that the rankings that I have here are not very scientific. They are very personal. They are very subjective. They are what I think based on my experience. I don't think that there is a lot of other players who has that much experience, I guess. There are a bunch of really good players, but I meet them at the international tournaments. Um, so I think that if we're looking for someone to actually like have that experience, um, a player like me, maybe not me, but a player like me would be a good bet for someone who could evaluate what other players, how good are they. Um, I don't know that I'm the best at this at all, and you can go and watch my feedback for different tournaments where I rank the lists and I try to guess who's going to win, and I'm a little better than 50%, but not much. So list ranking and player ranking all came from that, and it's an attempt to try and talk about what I think will win, right? Who I think will win. How good do I think they are, the players? How good do I think the lists are? So it's just an using of words. It's not a fixed system. A while back, the Juggernaut Bolt Action podcast had a whole episode where they sort of crap talked on player ranking. I still think it's really useful um, because it gives you a language to talk about. It's not like you can go and see that player is the best in the world, or because this player won that tournament, he is the best, or whatever. That's not really how it works out. But there is a consistency. Like some of the best players will consistently end up in the top 5 or whatever. Right, and that is what it really means for me, that if you have some players who consistently perform better than other players, if you have some lists that consistently perform better than other lists, or some units that are in lists that perform better, because we don't really have like that is the list that always wins. That doesn't really happen in bold action. Um, so that is why list ranking and player ranking is a thing that I talk about here. The final term that is tournament shorthand is blue on blue. Blue on blue means that you have, and it's a term borrowed from real warfare, where if you have blue on blue fire, then it's because it's friendly fire, basically, right? So blue on blue means that the allies can fight the allies and the Axis powers can fight the Axis powers. That is what you typically see in tournament play. You can also have red on blue, where it's you have, and that's typically for thematic play or thematic events, where the Axis powers has to fight an ally. So that is what that means. Then I have a list building slang, and this is a lot of it is my words for it, but I do see some of them catching on around. Army builds is something that I borrowed from 40k, I guess, and that is a way of thinking about different lists and sort of categorizing them into broader categories based on what it is that they're trying to do. So many of the words here that I have here are army builds. For instance, leaf blowers. Leaf blower armies, again, is borrowed from 40k. That's armies that try to spread out as many pie plates, as many template HE templates as possible, and just shoot the enemy into oblivion. So kind of like a huge leaf blower blowing the enemy off the table, right? Um, so that's an army build where you max out on HE. MSU is also an army build, multiple small units. That's where you have many, like 10 or more, small, like 3, 4, 2-man units in your army list. And some armies do this really well. American FSSF scouts, for instance, are really useful for that build. Barbecue, um, that is basically just that's a term that I also I think I borrow from 40k, which is when you have a lot of flamers in your list. It's a barbecue. You're lighting up the fire, right? So you're barbecuing. Um, Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Assault lists, that is lists that are focused on getting into close combat with the enemy and winning there. Gurkha lists, Polish Lancers, Japanese lists, that sort of thing. So again, it's a question of me being able to talk about certain things that I'm seeing, categories that I'm seeing, just making up the words for that. Mixed bag lists or balanced lists is a list where you try to find a balance where you have a little bit of everything. So you have like some long range shots, some HE, some flamers, some armor, some assault. That's a mixed bag. You have a little bit of everything. Um, Also a very effective and very, very common army build. Then we have the horde armies. Horde armies is where you try to maximize how many bodies you're placing on the table. Um, this can be really effective in some armies, Japanese, for instance. And you have faux tank or pseudo tank lists. Faux tank list is when you're trying to build a tank platoon, but don't really have access to a tank platoon. So you're taking armored vehicles, typically armored transports, or you have access to 3, like a tank and maybe 2 armored cars or something like that. Maybe an extra tank for because you have your like minor access power and you can take a German tank in with you or whatever, something like that. That is when you build faux tank, where you have a generic reinforced platoon, but you're trying to max out on armored vehicles. This can also be called mechanized. That's where you have most of your infantry mounted up in armored personnel carriers, or motorized when you have your infantry mounted up in trucks. Skirmish units and skirmish army builds is also a thing. That is army builds where you have a lot of infantry and a lot of units that are focused on the firefight, the movable firefight that happens in the middle of the table. So you're not going in with your assaulters. You're not going in with your flamethrowers. You're not making an armored spearhead that thrusts through the enemy. You're staying at a certain range and you're shooting the enemy and giving him pins and giving him casualties. If most of your army is doing that, then it's a skirmish army. And if your unit is designed for that, then it's a skirmish unit. Net listing is a term that I borrowed from X-Wing and 40K. It's when you go online and see what other people have done, and then you more or less copy their list, and then you try to make that work. In bold action, doesn't really work all that well, but there are people who've done that, and I can definitely see that my YouTube channel here is having an effect because a lot of people have started using units that I have championed. Right, the LVT suddenly appeared in lists around the world, and the early war motorcycles, spamming those in British armies also suddenly was a thing that everyone did. So, I mean, there is a little bit of net listing that I'm not accusing anyone of just copying my lists and just going off and trying to win tournaments with that. But there is little bit of, you look at what other people are doing and then you get inspired by that. If it's too much inspiration, then it's what we would disparaging call net listing, where you just copy down your list from someone else. Then we have Brengineers, which is a amalgamation of the Bren carrier, the universal carrier, and engineers, because that combination of two units happens so much in tournament play. So Brengineers is like those two units combined, Bren engineers. Mercus is a unit that I've never actually seen in real life, although I have on my channel reviewed lists that had that. It's a stupid rule mistake that Warlord Games made at some point, where they said you can buy Maori national special rules for any of the units in the army book, which meant that you could buy it for Gurkhas. So even though Gurkhas are from Nepal and the Maoris are from New Zealand, these two groups could actually be put together, and together they form Merkas, Maori Gurkhas. And why would you ever do that? Well, you only do that if if you don't really want your opponent to be happy, and you really want to win the game, because it will make your already very powerful Gurkhas even more overpowered. Then there's the Daka Tank, a word that my local club really championed, the Daka Steward, and the Daka Tanks in general. Um, it's a term borrowed from 40K, where the orcs of 40K would term anything that had a lot of shots Daka. Right, they would shout Daka Daka when they were shooting, um, imitating the sound of machine guns. So I use that term for machine gun platform tanks. The Daka Steward is a term, and it's really catching on. I've heard of around the world now. Um, Min-maxing is another term borrowed from a lot of other games that have points values. Um, it's when you save points on one unit, making it the minimum size that you need in order to spend points on something else, maxing out. So you're minimizing something in order to maximize something else. Because some of your units don't really need to be that like realistic size. They just need to be a size where they can stay in your own back lines and hold an objective. But other units might need extra care and extra love and extra gear or whatever. That is called min-maxing. And that is part of list building, unfortunately. Part of list building that I think many non-competitive players really dislike. I don't mind at all. OP, overpowered, is something that a lot of people disparagingly use about certain units or certain army builds. That it's OP. Or auto win, meaning that you don't really have to think about it. I personally don't believe that there is any such thing as an auto win list or an auto win army or an auto win unit in bold action. Um, since I have won against all units that exist in bold action, I don't think that this is true. but it is something that people will use mostly disparagingly about units that they dislike or think are too powerful or too cheap for what they deliver. And there can be like a lot of merit in a case saying that some units are undercosted or overcosted. That is absolutely true. Spam. Spam is borrowed from the where was it from? It's well, a spam. It means like ham in a tin, right? And I think it was, I don't know who used it in a game context. Anywho, um, it's when you take a lot of the same unit, right? So you spam, spam, spam the same unit again and again and again. Um, and and that is part of list building for many of the army builds that you've just seen. So in MSU, you would spam certain infantry units. In Leaf Blower, you would spam HE howitzers or mortars. In assault units, you would spam Gurkhas or lancers or whatever. In barbecue, you would spam flamers, right? You would take the same unit again and again and again. So spamming is when you repeat the same unit. Then there's a lot of disparagement and jokes being lobbed around in bold action. Noob is, of course, one that I apparently should be careful when saying. Um, I don't typically use it myself, but it's a game term. It's a term used for beginning players, and it's quite often meant disparagingly, at least in video game where it's taken from computer gaming, right? So some people will use it disparagingly, talking about someone who's a complete noob, like meaning that they're not very good at something. Typically, I will use the term rookie myself, and that's because I started playing bold action straight from X-Wing, where rookie pilots that was the beginning level for an X-Wing pilot, right? Um, he was a rookie pilot, and that meant that players who started out they were called rookies. I really like that term because they're new. Um, then we have Wak, Waka, um, WAAC, win at all costa. That is a player who will. It's quite often used by thematic players against competitive players. You're just a win at all costa, or your list is win at all costs. Um, the term itself comes from people who are willing to cheat, which I don't think is a thing in bold action. I have never played against anyone where I thought you are cheating. Um, I have heard about cheating. I have uh, been at tournaments where people have been accused of doing something that wasn't right, and I know that because it's a very casual game. Sometimes we, accidentally push a unit or like the measurement is not very precise or whatever. That doesn't mean that we're cheating deliberately, right? It just means that something happens that, well, we make a mistake, right? But some people will make mistakes deliberately, and that's where the term comes from. But it's disparagingly used against all competitive players, which I think is okay. Although some players like the Juggernauts really like take it on board and call themselves walkers. But yeah, I don't typically not. Although sometimes I will. Then we have a dick move. A dick move is when you're being a dick, when you're doing something that you know you're going to win this game just by doing this, and it's not very nice because maybe the other player haven't really thought of that you can do that, and it's not very thematic or historical, and you're just like you're making his day miserable by doing this. That's a dick move. It's allowed by the rules, but it's not something that people who want to play a nice game do to each other. Then we have a term that competitive players disparagingly use about thematic players, and that is rivet counter. Someone who will count the rivets on your tank and say that's not the right tank because it's you've bought the wrong tank, then you can't use it. That's a rivet counter, right? Again, disparaging term or an endearing term depending on the tone of voice, like Waka. Cheese and cheesy. I don't know how that ended up being a term, but if you're uh, if you're bringing cheese, then it means that you're bringing a very, very competitive, very whack list. Um, if you're being cheesy, that means you're being a very competitive player. So that's basically what it is. Then there are three terms that I want to bring up that I've heard been thrown around. One of them I've coined myself. Um, Go back to 40k. That is that's one that really triggers me. I fucking hate that one. It's something that thematic players sometimes in heated arguments have used against competitive players because they think that it's okay to gatekeep bold action and say that, well, you're not allowed to play here. The way you're playing the game, really, you should go play 40k because that is where that sort of behavior belongs. Competitive gaming. And I really think that sucks. It's for me that is one of the few things that really triggers me. The few arguments I've had over bold action have all been about this sort of attitude. I really dislike that. I hope and I pray and I think that bold action is a game that's big enough to love in many different ways and play in many different ways. Um, and I wouldn't tell a thematic player that they are playing the game wrong. Um, I might struggle to build thematic lists, but that's something else. I will be completely open and say that. But I would never say to them that they are playing my game wrong and should leave the game. That's just not okay. Um, then there's a term that I coined myself, and or at least was coined on this channel, and that is good for 3 wins. It's a joke between me and the Juggernaut Bold Action podcast, where me and Alistair at one point we were evaluating lists and we were doing Dan Lane's list for the WTC in Cork. And I think it was Al who said, it's an okay list. It's good for 3 wins. And ever since that, whenever the juggers or me talk to each other, it's always it's good for 3 wins. Um, because Dan Lane went on to become the single best individual player at the WTC, so he did really well with his list. That was good for 3 wins, um, meaning that well it was more or less automatic that you would get 3 wins, and then the two final games would be dicey or whatever, depending on who you were facing. And of course, he did really well. So the final term is it's not the list people will typically finish it with. It's the player. Um, and this is one I actually think is rather true, that it's not actually the list, although the list does have an element in why you win games or not. Um, but I think the player is more important. So this is something that competitive players quite often throw around. I think because they like to think that at least I like to think, and I also do think that it's the player that's the most important bit in determining who wins a game or who loses the game. I don't think the lists are actually where it's at. And if we're looking at players at the top performing players at tournaments, it's not the same list that they're using. It's never the same list. So this is just like a term that gets thrown around quite a lot. And if anyone is complaining after a game, oh, I faced Gurkhas again, or I faced Polish Lancers, I do that quite a lot with my partisans. I don't think I can beat Polish Lancers. I lost to them 2 games last weekend. Um, it's oh, my list is just bad, and people will say to me, no, it's not your list, it's the player. And they're completely right. Of course it is. Although I do think that there are some lists where the matchup is just bad. Then we have a lot of in-game terms. So conga lining, that is when you line up your units in a long, thin line. So doing the conga dance. Snaking is a term for the same thing. You're snaking around terrain. Or horseshoeing, also a term that's like, imagine you have an area piece of terrain, a forest or something, and you're horseshoeing your unit all the way around it to make sure that you have cover, but also make sure that you're on both sides of the terrain and can charge whatever. That for me, horseshoeing is also when you poke out one unit, like one man in your infantry, and the rest go behind the cover. That is called peeking, where you like put out one, like, just peeking out behind a house or a forest or whatever. So more or less four terms that cover the same thing. Pie slicing is a term I have borrowed from Infinity the game, which I used to play competitively as well. Um, that is when you get down and from model's eye view, you make sure that, right, if I place my model right here, like imagine there's a house corner. I place my model right here. That means I can see all of that, but I can't see that sniper right there, right? And you slice the pie so thin, right? You're making a pie slice. Like you're slicing that pie so thinly that you can just spot what you want to shoot, but can't spot everything else. That's called pie slicing. A suicide block is when you take a vehicle or a unit and place them where you know they're going to die, just so that the opponent can't move there. So you sacrifice it. A bounce. A bounce is when you use an enemy unit like a vehicle or an infantry unit, you charge them, and then afterwards you bounce off. You like bounce on, and it doesn't matter if you kill that vehicle or whatever. You use it for the extra movement that it gives you because you can charge it and then move d6 inches or whatever. Nothing but a pin is something you'll hear being said again and again. Like, I'm shooting that unit. Nothing but a pin, because you like hit it once but didn't kill it. Cocked dice is when your dice is not absolutely straight on a table, and because a lot of us have a tendency to throw our dice on the table near where the action is. I like doing that anyway. That means that quite often the dice will touch terrain. So you'll see players trying to agree beforehand, like, does the does the dice need to be absolutely flat on the mat, or can it like just be flat in terrain? And if it touches terrain, then it's cocked, and it doesn't, like, you have to re-roll it. All of that is something you have to agree on. Cocked dice is typically when it's slightly not straight, and some players will even put another dice on top of it to measure. If it falls off, then the dice is cocked. If it doesn't, then it's okay. A lot of us also use these two words interchangeably. Recce and escape moves. Not the same thing. Recce is a special rule that your vehicles can have. Escape moves is a move that some units can make even though they're not vehicles. Like cavalry can do escape moves but don't have recce. So we tend to use those interchangeably because we know that recce, I'm going to recce my cavalry. You're not wrecking your cavalry, you're escape moving your cavalry. But OD, OD is shorthand, an abbreviation for order dice. LOS, line of sight, is an abbreviation for what can we actually see, like what can my model see. Dense is dense terrain, which is area terrain in bold action, so ruins and forests. And Stalingrad table is the final one for in-game, that's when you have a table where the most dominant form of terrain is ruins. There was a lot of ruined cities in World War II, but people have started calling every ruined table the Stalingrad table. Like, I think they're on the Stalingrad table, right? And then you point down to that end of the hall where the two players that you're looking for is playing on a table with a lot of ruins. And then there are some different words for things in the rules. So raw, rules as written, and rye, rules as intended. These two have, at least in the past, clashed right often. Um, because the rules that Warlord Games have written, although they're brilliant in many respects, they also are worded in a way that may not be absolutely clear always. So what the authors intended us to play may not be actually what's in the actual rulebook. And at least for a lot of non-English speakers, the the prepositions can become really, really important. Um, on or at the edge of something, all of that becomes really important, and it's not everyone who understands that. So there have been, at least in the past, been a lot of debates between people who wanted to interpret a rules as written and people who wanted to find the intention behind it. um, the FAQ, the FAQ, frequently asked questions, have helped clear up a lot of that. And I think with version 3, we're all hoping that a lot of that goes away, or we might get a whole new round of raw versus rye. Codex creep is something that we're all wanting to avoid with every new book that comes out. I think because a lot of us have played 40k before, and codex creep was a thing in 40k. It's a term borrowed from 40k. It is when um, the the codexes that you have, when they like increasingly grow powerful. With every new book, it becomes more and more powerful. The things that are in that. So which means that basically you can change out your army, like start over every single time. And that was why I quit 40k, by the way. GRP, generic reinforced platoon. That is the platoon type that we are mostly playing in most competitive tournaments because it's potentially the most balanced one ish. I think some of the theater ones are really funny and interesting to play, but I don't think that they're very balanced, although other people will disagree with me. Um, so generic reinforced platoon is the one that we're seeing mostly. Theater only, that is when you have units or selectors that are only for that specific theater book, because Warlord Games don't release codexes, they release theater books. So a book about the war in Burma, or a book about the war in China, or a book about the war in Northern Africa. Um, that's the theater books, and there are some units and selectors that are only allowed in those. So we will typically distinguish between units that are allowed in generic reinforced platoons and units that are theater only. Pay to win is another term from, I think that's from Magic the Gathering, um, that is borrowed into to bold action. Is a term that, or is an idea that we really want to avoid. Um, and that is when you have codex creep, then what you need to do is that, for me, that was at least also why I quit X-Wing at one point, is you need to buy the newest stuff in order to win, because you need the newest stuff because it's a little bit better because of codex creep. So you're paying to win. You're paying to keep up and then win games. That is something that most bold action players don't want. Yeah, that was it for me today. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it cleared up some of the words that I'm using on the show regularly, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.